Hello, I'm Miranda Kahn.
And I'm John Buckman. Coming up this hour on Newsmax Now.
He's been called the country's first Tea Partier, at least since the Revolutionary War. But this week, the nation says goodbye to Bruce Alger. Newsmax chief Washington correspondent John Gizzi joins us with more on why Alger's legacy and the Tea Party may still be strong.
Plus, the leader of Iran taking shot at the president and his handling over Baltimore and Ferguson, Missouri. Find out why some are calling Iran's Ayatollah the Ayatollah. And Jimmy Fallon poking a little fun at Hillary Clinton, writing in Iowa a thank you note in the Des Moines newspaper.
We have all that and more coming up next on Newsmax Now. And welcome to Newsmax Now. I'm Miranda Kahn, and today is Wednesday, April 29th.
That's right, all day long, Miranda. Good to be with you guys. And our top story this hour, we're learning now that the FBI may have tried to help negotiate a ransom for a hostage that was killed during that drone strike. Remember, we talked about Warren Weinstein. We're now hearing about this and perhaps a ransom here, according to top officials now. And this is our top story. We'll move ahead. The FBI decided to help the Weinstein family after they refused to back down on this issue. The agency says it did not break any rules about negotiating with terrorists since they didn't authorize the ransom payment, perhaps just serving as some sort of go-between here. The family of murdered ISIS hostage James Foley had previously said the White House offered no help trying to negotiate his release before he was beheaded. Also, we're hearing today the leader of ISIS may now be paralyzed. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi suffered a spinal cord injury while riding in a convoy that was hit by an airstrike back in March. According to many reports, he is unable to move. Also, the Jerusalem Post saying today that the ISIS leader may be declared clinically dead by Israeli doctors in the Golan Heights. But the reports aren't holding ISIS militants back now. Saudi Arabia says it has stopped a plot to bomb the American embassy in Riyadh. Nearly 100 suspected ISIS terrorists are now in custody of Saudi Arabia. These raids started back in December. All of the folks in custody, Saudi nationals. The group had apparently set up training sites where they were testing car bombs and had selected several targets, including the U.S. Embassy.
Secretary of State John Kerry may be getting a little too cozy with the Iranians. Today, the Washington Free Beacon reports that Kerry told his Iranian counterpart that, quote, he wished the United States had a leader more like Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei. But it's Iran state-run media reporting that top U.S. officials say the report is absurd. The death toll in Nepal and that Nepal earthquake now tops more than 5,000 people. A few shops are slowly reopening after the devastating earthquake 4 days ago. The 7.9 magnitude quake destroyed the capital city, as you can see, leaving thousands without homes, food, or water. The UN has now launched an appeal for more than $400 million.
Funding at this point in time is so critical to get the amount of money we need across those key sectors in order for us to deliver the humanitarian assistance at the level and the type that's required.
Nepal's prime minister has warned that the death toll could exceed 10,000 people. He spoke with President Obama earlier today.
Pope Francis praying for the victims of that earthquake. He's also pressing for equal pay for women. Speaking at the Vatican, Francis urged the faithful to support the rights of women, asking why, rhetorically, should it be taken for granted that women earn less than men in today's society. But despite the Pope's progressive views, the number of Christians around the globe apparently dwindling. A new Pew Research study says that by 2050, Christians will number about 2.9 billion worldwide. Muslims, not far behind, numbering about 2.7 billion. Both religions are expected to grow between now and then, but the number of Muslims will almost double compared to Christians.
Many call this Washington teacher a hero after he stopped a student from shooting up a high school. It happened about 60 miles from Seattle. Police say the 16-year-old boy took the gun to school on Monday morning. He managed to fire off a couple of shots before teacher Brady Olson tackled him.
I saw a gun. I'm well versed with guns. I saw it was a .357 is what I thought, immediately recognized it. He walked around the right side of the pillar. I followed him. He then fired again, and that's when I was able to get him.
Prosecutors say the boy was heading towards a group of students who were waiting for class to begin. The student is currently under a mental health evaluation, or mental health hold rather, while he awaits that evaluation.
The sheriff in Tulsa County, Oklahoma may have actually known about problems with the training of that volunteer deputy who actually accidentally shot a suspect. Lawyers for the victim have released a document that appears to show that Sheriff Stanley Glanz's initials are on a memo detailing concerns about the training record of Robert Bates. He is the one facing second-degree manslaughter charges now after shooting Eric Harris during his arrest last month. And Martin OMalley is taking fire from the left, and we'll talk about that in just a second.
And as you just mentioned, Martin OMalley is taking fire from the left. The former Maryland Governor Martin OMalley was heckled on a packed street corner in West Baltimore yesterday after he cut short that trip to Europe, John, as you may recall, to return back to the city that he led as mayor for about 7 years. In the New York Times, this is what they're reporting. People were pretty upset, to say the least, saying that, he made promises. One man shouted and said he did the best that he could. And then you heard people saying, in what community? Not in the black community. So definitely feeling a little heat. Will this hurt him when if he decides that he wants to run for the presidency?
It depends how long the interest in this story remains. I don't think the riots or the looting or that hurts him as much. But the underlying issues here for Martin OMalley are pretty significant. We were talking a lot about The Wire, the show on HBO.
Right.
I've been paying close attention to the creator of that show, David Simon. He's been writing about this as well. He talked to the Marshall Foundation, a nonprofit journalism organization, and he is blaming Martin OMalley, both the former mayor of Baltimore and the governor of Maryland, for being, quote, the stake through the heart of police procedure. Martin OMalley had a very tough crime policy when he was the mayor of Baltimore. And David Simon going on to say, let's see if we can find it here. He blamed the Baltimore mayor and the former governor of Maryland for being the stake in the heart of police procedure. According to Simon, during his time as mayor, OMalley, who was also, as we mentioned, a potential 2016 Democratic presidential candidate, was so set on reducing crime that the police department learned to target individuals using, quote, less than constitutional tactics.
Right, and then earlier we were talking about the former mayor, Rudy Giuliani, also being very critical about Democrats and basically coming right out and saying liberals are to blame for a lot of the problems that you see happening in Baltimore.
Rudy Giuliani, also the mayor of New York, implemented his own tough on crime tactics. Those seem to have worked a little bit better in New York City. He gets a lot of credit for turning around a lot of tough areas of New York City that were not desirable. Of course, they are now desirable.
And then, interesting enough, we have presidential hopeful Hillary Clinton, who was speaking earlier today, talking about not Baltimore specifically, but incarceration and what's going on. And interesting enough, transparency that needs to be made with the police department and the community in support of those body cameras that a lot of people are now in support of. Why there wasn't body cameras in this situation, I'm sure that they will be following suit like many communities around the country.
Yeah, certainly there's a place for that, but is really the Hillary Clinton, when you talk about transparency, the right person
I
to
knew.
make
I was
that
waiting for you
argument
to do that. Did you like that?
We'll see.
Yeah.
She's got to talk about something, and this is an interesting take. I don't know if there's anything original there. I have to listen to more of the speech. I didn't have a chance to listen to all of it, but we know that this has been an issue that's been discussed in great detail by Rand Paul and Cory Booker in the Senate. They're working together on reducing mandatory sentences for nonviolent drug convictions, things like that. We'll see if Hillary's take is much different, but we can certainly talk about that. Also interesting today, happening in Baltimore, a little Major League Baseball game, but nobody's there to see it.
No fanfare. Yeah, there's been somewhat of a blame game going on when it comes to how the riot started and why they escalated. And as you mentioned, this is probably the first for Major League Baseball.
That's what Major League Baseball is saying. The first time they played a game without a crowd there.
I'm just trying to imagine how eerie that is for these players to get out and have no fans to heckle or cheer.
Yeah, fans, at least in Major League Baseball.
And you're a huge baseball fan.
Such a part of the game, although in a lot of Major League parks around the country, sometimes it seems like there's no folks in the stands. But that's just one of the interesting side notes of this story. And we'll keep an eye on that, see what happens. We talked about this earlier. You kind of alluded to this. The Milwaukee County Sheriff, David Clark, again, talking about leadership, and the question now turns to law enforcement's responsibility and all this, not just law enforcement's responsibility, but their bosses, the governor, the mayor, and on down, the response time, more to come. We're going to talk about this, a lot of other stuff happening today here on Newsmax Now. Stick around, we'll be with you for the next 2 hours.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about the Republican presidential candidate who's supporting Obama on drone strikes, coming up.